I knew the princess would choose her knight before she even said his name. After all, I had already watched her make that mistake once, and I had already watched an entire kingdom burn because of it. The grand hall of Asterland Palace was filled with nobles, generals, and ministers from every corner of the kingdom. Hundreds of candles illuminated the golden walls. The royal banners hung above the throne. Everyone believed they were witnessing the beginning of a new era. They believed Princess Serafina Valen would announce the man who had stood beside her for the past decade. Me, Cain Blackrose, the heir of House Blackrose, the youngest member of the Royal Financial Council, the man who had saved the kingdom from bankruptcy, the man who had negotiated with rebellious nobles, the man who had rebuilt the southern ports and increased royal revenue, the man who had taken an arrow meant for her 3 months ago. The scar beneath my clothes still burned whenever the weather changed. But none of that mattered, because when Serafina stepped forward, she did not look at me. She turned toward the man standing beside her, Lucian Vale, her personal knight, her childhood companion, the man holding a sword instead of a ledger, the man who had never carried the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders. Serafina smiled, and then she spoke the words that destroyed my first life. My choice is Lucian Vale. Silence. Absolute silence. The entire hall froze. I watched nobles exchange confused glances. I watched ministers lower their heads. Everyone had expected my name. Everyone except me, because I had already lived through this moment once. I had already watched the woman I loved choose someone else. The first time, I fought. I begged. I asked her why 10 years of loyalty meant nothing. I asked why the man who protected her kingdom was considered more dangerous than the man who simply loved her. But this time, I only stood there. Serafina looked at me. For a brief moment, I saw hesitation in her eyes. Maybe she expected anger. Maybe she expected me to stop the ceremony. Maybe she expected the same desperate man who had spent 10 years chasing her approval. She was wrong. I wish you happiness, Your Highness. My voice was calm, too calm. The entire hall became even quieter. Lucian looked surprised. Serafina's smile disappeared slightly. Cain. She whispered my name like she wanted to say something else, but I simply bowed. The same gesture I had performed countless times before. Only this time, it was not a promise. It was goodbye. In my first life, I left the palace that day with nothing but my wounded pride. But I still protected her, because even after she rejected me, I could not abandon the kingdom. I completed the final financial reforms. I stabilized the royal treasury. I continued sending resources from House Blackrose. I convinced northern merchants to maintain trade routes. I told myself that love did not need to be returned, that protecting someone was enough. I was wrong. When I stopped holding everything together, the cracks appeared quickly. Lucian was a brilliant warrior, but wars were not won only with swords. Kingdoms did not survive because someone could swing a blade. They survived because someone knew when not to draw one. The royal treasury collapsed. The nobles began fighting for power. The neighboring empire saw weakness. And behind everything stood Duke Adrian Voss, the man everyone trusted, the man who had secretly manipulated every conflict. By the time we discovered the truth, it was too late. The enemy army crossed our borders. The capital fell. I still remember the final battle, the screams, the flames, the endless rain covering the blood on the palace steps. I could have escaped. House Blackrose had ships, money, resources. I could have left Asterland behind. But I stayed, because despite everything, this was still my home. I fought until my body could no longer move. The last thing I saw was the palace where I had spent my entire life protecting someone who never truly chose me. Then darkness came. When I opened my eyes again, I was not lying on the battlefield. I was standing in my study. The morning sunlight entered through the window. The familiar scent of old books filled the room. For several seconds, I could not breathe, because I knew this place. I knew this day. The engagement ceremony was 1 month away. The same month when Serafina would choose Lucian. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from disbelief. I had been given another chance. A second life, but this time, I would not spend it begging someone to see my worth. A knock came from the door. A royal messenger entered. Lord Cain. Princess Serafina requests your presence. I almost laughed. In my previous life, this was the beginning of another endless night. She would ask me to solve a problem. I would stay awake until dawn, and she would never know the cost. The messenger handed me a stack of documents. Her Highness needs your assistance with the military budget review for Sir Lucian's night order. I looked down at the papers. For a moment, memories flooded back. The countless nights, the endless sacrifices, the belief that if I gave enough, she would eventually choose me. But that man was gone. I placed the documents back on the table. Return them. The messenger froze. Return them. I nodded. Yes. He looked confused. But Lord Kane, Her Highness expects you to handle this. I calmly looked at him. Then Her Highness should ask the man she chose. The messenger left in silence. And for the first time in my life, I refused to solve a problem that was never mine. Somewhere in the palace, Princess Serafina was probably waiting for me to appear, waiting for the man who always came when she called. But that man no longer existed, and when she finally realized that, it would already be too late. For the first time in my life, I watched Princess Serafina wait for me, not as her advisor, not as the heir of House Black Rose, not as the man who would solve every problem she placed in front of him. She waited for the man who had always come running whenever she called. But that man was gone. The morning after my rebirth, I returned to the palace. The same marble halls, the same golden statues, the same servants lowering their heads as I walked past. Everything looked exactly the same, but I was different. 1 month ago, I would have walked into this palace believing I could still change the future. I would have believed that if I explained myself better, worked harder, sacrificed more, Serafina would eventually understand. Now, I knew the truth. Some people did not fail to see your value. They simply saw it and decided it was something they could use. The moment I entered the royal study, I saw her. Princess Serafina stood beside the window. Her golden hair fell over her shoulders. She was wearing the same white dress she had worn countless times when meeting with me. For a second, I almost remembered the girl from my past. The girl who once held my hand when we were young and told me, "I believe in you, Kane." Those words had been enough to make me spend 10 years proving myself. But the woman standing before me was no longer that girl. Kane. She turned around. Her expression softened slightly. "You came." I looked at her calmly. "Yes, Your Highness." A small frown appeared on her face. She noticed it, the distance, the unfamiliar politeness. Before, I had always called her Serafina, even when we were surrounded by nobles, even when everyone knew my feelings. But now, she was only the princess. "What happened to you?" she asked. I looked at her. "What do you mean? You have been avoiding me." Her voice carried a hint of confusion. Not anger, not sadness, just confusion, as if she could not understand why someone who had spent 10 years beside her suddenly stopped. I almost laughed, because that was the problem. She had never considered the possibility that I might leave. "Kane, I need your help." There it was, the same sentence, the same beginning. In my previous life, those words could make me forget exhaustion, forget hunger, forget everything except her request. What happened? Her expression relaxed. She thought I had returned to normal. Lucian's night order has some issues with their military funding reports. Of course, Lucian, even before becoming her husband, he was already my responsibility. Serafina picked up a stack of documents. "I need you to review them. It should not take too long." I stared at the papers. In my previous life, I had accepted them immediately. I would have stayed awake for 3 nights. I would have corrected every mistake. I would have found additional funding. I would have made Lucian look competent. And then everyone would have praised the Knight Commander for his dedication. Nobody would remember who fixed the problem. But this time, I did not touch the documents. Serafina noticed. "Kane." I placed the papers back on the table. "No." The room became silent. Her eyes widened slightly. "No." I shook my head. "This is not my responsibility." A strange expression appeared on her face. Almost disbelief. "Not your responsibility." I looked directly at her. "It belongs to the Silver Lion Knights. Lucian commands them. If he wishes to stand beside you in the future, He should learn how to handle the responsibilities that come with that position. Her lips parted slightly. She did not expect those words from me, because in her memory, I had always protected her from every consequence. Cain, this is not about Lucian, isn't it? My question made her silent. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she sighed. You are upset. No. Then why are you acting like this? Because I died once. Because I watched everything collapse. Because I spent my entire life loving someone who only noticed me when she needed something. But I did not say those words. Instead, I answered, because I finally understand my place. Her expression changed. Cain, you have made your choice. I looked at her, and I respect it. Those words seemed to hurt her more than anger would have. Because anger meant I still wanted something. But acceptance meant I was letting go. 3 days later, I submitted my resignation from the Royal Financial Council. The entire palace was shocked. Nobody expected the youngest financial genius in Asterland to voluntarily leave such an important position. The king personally summoned me. Cain. I stood before him, because I respected the king. I gave him the simplest answer. I need to focus on House Blackrose. The king studied me carefully. You have served this kingdom faithfully. I still will. But I will no longer carry responsibilities that belong to others. The king did not respond immediately. Perhaps he understood. Perhaps he saw something in my eyes that had not been there before. A man who had finally stopped sacrificing himself. Before leaving the palace, I returned one final thing. A silver emblem. The symbol Serafina had given me years ago. The first gift she ever gave me. The first thing that made me believe I was special. When I placed it on her desk, she stared at it for a long time. Why are you returning this? I answered honestly, because it belongs to someone who believed in the future we imagined. Her fingers tightened around the emblem. Cain. But I turned away. I had spent 10 years waiting for her to choose me. I would not spend another day waiting. A month later, the engagement ceremony arrived. The entire kingdom gathered in the royal hall. The same scene, the same throne, the same princess, the same night. The difference was, this time, I already knew the ending. Serafina stepped forward. She took Lucian's hand and announced, my choice is Lucian Vale. The nobles looked at me, waiting. They expected anger, confrontation, a final attempt. But I only stood. Then I smiled, and I applauded. One person, then another. Soon, the entire hall followed. Serafina looked at me. For the first time, her confidence disappeared. She had expected me to fight for her. She had expected me to prove my love one more time. Instead, I gave her exactly what she asked for, freedom. After the ceremony, Lucian approached me. There was a hint of pride in his eyes. I suppose congratulations are in order. I looked at him. Yes. Then I added quietly, from today onward, protecting her is no longer my duty. His smile faded slightly, because he finally understood. He had won the woman, but he had inherited everything that came with her. The responsibility, the pressure, the kingdom. And I was finally free. That evening, I stood alone on the palace balcony. The wind carried the sounds of celebration below. Then I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. A woman stood there, dark brown hair, golden brown eyes, a presence that made even the cold night feel sharper. Isabella Ravencrest, the woman everyone in the kingdom feared, the woman the royal family considered their greatest threat. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she asked, Lord Cain Blackrose, did you truly give up on the princess? I looked at the woman who, in my previous life, arrived too late to save me, the woman who placed a white rose on my grave. And for the first time, I wondered if fate had given me the second life not to win back what I lost, but to find what I should have chosen from the beginning. No, I said softly, I did not give up on her. I looked back at the palace. I simply stopped chasing someone who never chose me. Isabella's expression changed slightly, and then she asked the question that would change both our lives. Then what will you choose now? I looked at her, and I extended my hand. Isabella Ravencrest, will you marry me? For 3 seconds, Isabella Ravencrest did not move. The entire palace balcony was silent. The celebration below continued. Music, laughter, The voices of nobles congratulating Princess Serafina and Lucian. But between Isabella and me, everything felt strangely still. Her golden brown eyes looked directly into mine. Not like someone who had just received a marriage proposal. Like someone analyzing a battlefield. You want to marry me? It was not a question. It was a conclusion. I nodded. Yes. She looked past me toward the palace. Toward the lights where Serafina was still celebrating her engagement. Then she looked back at me. A simple question. But I knew what she really meant. Why me? Why now? Why after the woman you loved chose another man? I could have given her the political answer. I could have said, House Blackrose needs the military strength of House Ravencrest. House Ravencrest needs the financial power of House Blackrose. Together, we would become the strongest force in Asterland. That was true, but it was not the entire truth. I need someone who understands power. Isabella's expression did not change. Power, yes. I looked at her. Someone who knows that ruling a kingdom is not about winning every battle. Someone who understands that sometimes patience is stronger than a sword. For the first time, something changed in her eyes. A small reaction, almost invisible, but I noticed, because I had spent 10 years studying people. Especially the woman standing in front of me. I have a question. Lord Blackrose asked, Am I your revenge? The words were direct, cold, honest, and somehow, I respected her more because of them. No. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Then why does this feel like you are running away? Because I was, but not from her. I was running away from the version of myself who had spent 10 years begging for someone's approval. I am not running away. I paused. I am choosing a different path. Isabella remained silent. Then she spoke. If I agree, there will be conditions. I expected that. She stepped closer. The moonlight reflected on her dark hair. First, our marriage will not be a decoration. I nodded. We make decisions together. Agreed. Second, you will never use me as a weapon against Princess Serafina. My expression became serious. Agreed. Her eyes studied my face. She was searching for hesitation. There was none. Third, if you still love her. She paused. If your heart is still waiting for her to turn around. Tell me before the wedding. I looked at her. A strange feeling appeared in my chest. Not pain. Not anger. Something closer to admiration. Because Isabella Ravencrest was the first person who cared about the truth more than the opportunity. She did not want to win. She wanted to know what she was choosing. I accept all 3 conditions. For the first time that night, Isabella looked surprised. You agreed too quickly. Because they are reasonable. Her expression softened slightly. Most people would have tried to negotiate. I spent my first life negotiating for someone's affection. I looked at the palace behind me. I will not do that again. The wind passed between us. And after a long silence, Isabella finally nodded. Then I accept. The announcement shocked the entire kingdom. Within a day, everyone knew. Cain Blackrose was engaged. Not to Princess Serafina, but to Isabella Ravencrest. The woman the royal family feared most. The northern heiress. The commander who controlled the strongest border army in Asterland. The woman nobles secretly called. The queen who never smiles. When the news reached the palace, Serafina came to find me. I was reviewing trade documents in the Blackrose estate. She entered without waiting for permission, a habit she had developed years ago. Cain. I looked up. Her expression was complicated. You are really doing this? I calmly placed the document down. Yes. With Isabella. Yes. Her hands tightened slightly. Is this because of me? No. The answer came immediately. That seemed to surprise her. You cannot expect me to believe that. I looked at her. Why not? Because everything happened after the ceremony. I smiled slightly. Your Highness, I am not marrying Isabella because you chose Lucian. I am marrying her because I chose myself. The room became quiet. Those words seemed to hit her harder than any accusation. You have changed. Yes, I did not deny it. Because I had. The old Cain would have spent hours explaining his pain. The old Cain would have hoped she finally understood. The old Cain would have waited for her regret. But that man was gone. Serafina looked at me for a long time. Then she whispered, Do you really not care anymore? I wanted to answer quickly, But the truth was complicated. I had loved her for 10 years. That feeling did not disappear overnight. So I said, cared. Her eyes moved slightly, but caring about someone does not mean destroying myself for them. She had no answer. For the first time, Princess Serafina looked like she had lost something. That evening, Isabella came to the Black Rose estate. We discussed wedding arrangements. She looked at the jewelry catalog in front of her with complete indifference. You dislike all of them? I asked. She looked confused. They are expensive stones. That was not my question. She stared at me. Then she pointed at a simple black silver ring. That one. It is durable. I almost smiled. Only because it is durable. Yes. I looked at her. Marriage should not only survive. It should also make you happy. Isabella froze. For a moment, she looked like she had forgotten how to respond, because nobody had ever asked her that question. Not what she could provide, not what she could protect, but what she wanted. After a few seconds, she quietly moved her hand toward another ring, a silver ring decorated with a small white moonstone. I suppose this one is acceptable. I nodded, but I noticed something. The corners of her lips had softened, almost like a smile. That night, before leaving, Isabella stopped at the door. Lord Blackrose, yes. She hesitated, then said, thank you. I looked at her. For what? She looked away. For treating me like a person. And then she left. I stood there for a long time, because those simple words felt heavier than any political agreement. And I suddenly realized something. Perhaps I was not the only person who had spent years being useful to everyone, but never truly chosen. 3 days later, on the night before our wedding announcement ceremony, I passed by Isabella's room. The door was slightly open. Inside, she stood before a mirror. Her expression was calm, almost cold, but the book in her hand had not moved for nearly 10 minutes. Her maid asked carefully, my lady, are you nervous? Isabella immediately answered, no. A pause. Then she quietly added, maybe. The maid smiled. I have never seen you nervous before. Isabella looked at her reflection, then whispered, if someone marries the person they truly like, how happy are they supposed to look? I stopped outside the door, and for the first time, I realized something. The woman everyone feared was also a woman who had been waiting a very long time to be chosen. I used to imagine my wedding day. For 10 years, I imagined standing beside Princess Serafina in the royal cathedral. I imagined the entire kingdom watching as the woman I loved finally chose me. I imagined her saying my name, not as a loyal advisor, not as the man who solved every problem, but as the person she wanted to spend her life with. That dream died the day she chose Lucian. And now, I was standing at the entrance of Black Rose Manor, waiting for another woman, Isabella Ravencrest, the woman who had never promised me anything. The woman who had never asked me to prove my worth. The woman who, somehow, was the first person to ask whether I was truly happy. The wedding ceremony was not held in the royal cathedral. It was held between our two families. A symbol, not of surrender, but of equality. Black Rose and Ravencrest, two powers that had spent decades standing separately, now standing together. The nobles watched carefully. Some believed this marriage was revenge. Others believed it was a political calculation. Perhaps they were right, at least at the beginning. But when Isabella walked toward me, I realized something. I did not feel like I was signing a treaty. I felt like I was meeting someone who had been waiting for me long before I noticed her. She wore a silver gray dress. Simple, elegant, nothing like the extravagant gowns worn by royal women. That was Isabella. She never needed decoration to make people look at her. Her presence was enough. When she reached me, she stopped. Her expression was calm, almost emotionless. But I noticed something. Her fingers were slightly trembling. Only slightly. Most people would never notice. But I did, because I knew what it meant. The woman who could command 10,000 soldiers was nervous about standing beside me. I lowered my voice. Are you afraid? Her eyes moved toward mine. No. A pause. Then she added, maybe. For a second, I almost smiled. Facing an enemy army is easier. She looked serious. Enemies usually follow predictable patterns. I looked at her. And marriage does not. Not even close. That was the first time I saw her almost smile. Almost. But it was enough. The ceremony continued. When the priest asked Isabella if she accepted me as her husband, she did not hesitate. I do. 2 simple words. But they felt heavier than all the promises I had heard before. Then it was my turn. I looked at her. Not at her family. Not at the nobles. Not at the kingdom. Only her. I do. When we exchanged rings, Isabella's hand was cold. I gently held it. She looked at me. You are supposed to release my hand. I know. Then why are you not? I smiled slightly. Because you are nervous. Her eyes widened slightly. I am not. You are. She looked away. And for the first time since I met her, Isabella Ravencrest looked embarrassed. After the ceremony, Princess Serafina approached. I knew she would. She stood several steps away, still wearing the expression of someone who did not understand what she was seeing. Her eyes moved between Isabella and me, especially our joined hands. Kane. I turned. Your Highness. The old habit almost disappeared from her face, because I no longer called her Serafina. You really married her. Yes. Her lips moved slightly, almost like she wanted to say something, but she stopped. Maybe because there was nothing left to say. For years, I had stood beside her, waiting, protecting, choosing her. And now, I was standing beside another woman. Someone else had taken the place she once assumed would always belong to her. Finally, she looked at Isabella, then back at me. Are you happy? It was a strange question, because she had never asked me that before. Not once. I looked at Isabella. She was speaking with the elders of both families. But when she noticed me looking, she immediately turned back, as if checking whether I was fine. A small action, almost meaningless, but somehow, it answered the question. Yes. Serafina became silent. That night was our first night as husband and wife. I expected many things: awkwardness, distance, a reminder that our marriage had started as an agreement. But Isabella surprised me. She was sitting beside the window, reading a book, the same position for nearly 20 minutes. I looked at the pages. You have not turned a page. She immediately closed the book. I was thinking about. She looked away. Tomorrow's schedule. I almost laughed. Isabella. Yes, you are holding the book upside down. The room became quiet. Then, a faint color appeared on her face. I noticed. No, you did not. She looked at me, and somehow, the strongest woman in Asterland looked completely defeated by a book. I sat beside her. Isabella. Yes, this marriage does not need to become something overnight. She looked at me. What do you mean? I mean, we do not have to force anything. I paused. You have spent your entire life carrying responsibilities. You do not need to carry this one alone. Her expression changed, because nobody had ever told her that. She had been trained to fight, to lead, to endure, but never to rest. You are not disappointed. No. I answered honestly, because respect should never be something you have to earn. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she quietly nodded. That night, I dreamed of fire, the royal palace burning, the screams of civilians, the sound of arrows breaking through armor, my own body falling beneath the palace stairs. I woke up suddenly. My breathing was unstable. For a moment, I forgot where I was. I forgot this was not the past. Then I heard a voice. Kane. I turned. Isabella was awake. She did not ask what happened. She did not demand explanations. She simply looked at me. May I? I froze. May you? She hesitated, then quietly said, hug you. Those words broke something inside me, because in my previous life, everyone asked me to protect them. Nobody asked if I needed protection. I nodded. Slowly, Isabella moved closer and held me, not like a noble protecting an ally, not like a wife fulfilling a duty, like someone who truly cared. You are safe. Her voice was quiet. You are here. The words were simple, but for the first time in a long time, I believed them. The next morning, I discovered every window in our room had been inspected. I looked at Isabella. What happened? She calmly drank her tea. The locks were weak. They were checked yesterday, and they were still not good enough. I stared at her. Did you do this because I coughed last night? She looked away. No, Isabella. A pause. Then, maybe. I almost smiled. You worry too much. No, she answered seriously. You simply did not have enough people worrying about you before. And that was the moment I realized something. This marriage was supposed to be a political agreement, a transaction between two powerful families. But for the first time in my life, I was beginning to wonder, maybe I had not chosen Isabella because she was the strongest ally I could find. Maybe I had chosen the one person who finally saw me. I used to think strength meant never needing anyone. That was what my father taught me. A Black Rose heir did not complain. A Black Rose heir did not hesitate. A Black Rose heir carried the burden so others could stand safely behind him. For most of my life, I believed that was what love was too. Giving, sacrificing, protecting, until Isabella Ravencrest showed me something I had never understood. Sometimes the strongest people were the ones who needed someone to stand beside them. Not behind them, not beneath them, beside them. 3 days after our wedding, we left for the north, Ravencrest territory, the land everyone in Asterland feared. Cold mountains, endless snowfields, fortresses built into cliffs, a place where every stone carried the memory of war. Most nobles imagined Isabella as a ruler who belonged here, a woman made of ice, commander who never smiled. But after spending a week beside her, I realized they were wrong. Isabella was not cold. She was exhausted. Every morning, she woke before sunrise. Every night, she continued working long after everyone else had left. Military reports, food supplies, border patrols, trade agreements. She remembered every soldier's name, every village's problem, every family affected by the winter storms. But she never once asked how she was doing. One evening, I found her still sitting in her office. The candles beside her had already burned halfway down. You are still working. She looked up. Kane. That was not an answer. She glanced at the documents. There are 3 supply routes that need approval before tomorrow. And you have been here since breakfast. 8. I looked at her. When she became silent. That was the answer. I walked over and closed the document in front of her. Her eyes narrowed. What are you doing? Saving my wife from destroying herself. I am not destroying myself. You have worked 15 hours today. I am the Lord of Ravencrest. You are also a person. The room became quiet. For a moment, Isabella looked almost confused, like she had never heard those words before. Person. Not a commander. Not an heir. Not a weapon for her family. Just a person. I do not have time to be tired. I looked at her. That is exactly why you need to rest. She opened her mouth, then stopped, because she knew I was right. The next day, I changed our schedule. Not the military meetings, not the important decisions. Only one thing, dinner. Every evening, together. First, Isabella objected. We can discuss reports while eating. No. Her eyebrows lifted. No. I looked at her seriously. Dinner is not a meeting, but we have limited time, and you have unlimited excuses. For a second, she stared at me, then something unexpected happened. She smiled, very slightly, almost impossible to notice, but I saw it, and somehow, that small smile felt like winning a battle. While inspecting the northern trade routes, I discovered a serious problem. The Ravencrest army had enough supplies, but transportation costs were too high. Food and weapons traveled through inefficient mountain roads. The soldiers were not lacking resources. They were wasting them. So I brought my family's shipping records. I connected Ravencrest's supply lines with Black Rose ports. A new route, faster, cheaper, more reliable. When I finished explaining the plan, Isabella looked at the map for a long time. You solved this in 3 days. Yes. She looked at me. The question surprised me. You are not required to improve Ravencrest territory. I looked at her. Our territory. She froze. I continued. Your responsibility is now my responsibility. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then she quietly looked away. But I noticed. Her fingers tightened around the map. A small reaction. The kind most people would miss. I was starting to understand Isabella. She was not someone who needed grand declarations. She noticed small things. because small things were what she had always lacked. That night, we returned from a border inspection. The snow was heavier than expected. Isabella's hands were red from the cold. When I noticed, I immediately took them. She reacted instantly. "I am fine. You always say that, because it is usually true." "No." I looked at her. "Because you are used to pretending." She became silent. I took out the medicine and carefully applied it to her fingers. Her entire body stiffened. Not because of pain, because she was not used to being cared for. You can command 10,000 soldiers. I looked at her. But you cannot allow someone to help you. She lowered her eyes. "It is a weakness." "No." I shook my head. "It is trust." She looked at me, and then she asked quietly, "What about you?" I paused. "What? You spend your entire life protecting others." Her voice became softer. "But who protects you?" The question hit harder than any weapon, because I did not have an answer. No one had ever asked me that. Not my family, not the royal court, not Serafina. Everyone knew what I could do. Everyone knew what I could provide. But no one had ever wondered if I was tired. For a long time, I just stood there. Then I pulled Isabella into my arms. She froze. I expected her to push me away. She did not. After a few seconds, her arms slowly wrapped around me. Two people who spent their lives pretending they needed nobody, finally admitting they did. Later that night, I found something in Isabella's study. A report. Old. The edges were worn. The handwriting was mine. I picked it up. It was a proposal from 10 years ago. A plan to send emergency supplies to northern villages during a severe winter. I remembered writing it. I remembered arguing with nobles who only cared about profit. But I never knew what happened afterward. I looked at Isabella. "Why do you have this?" She became quiet. For the first time, she looked uncertain. "Because it mattered." I stared at her. "To you." She looked at the document, then said, "The first time I saw your name, everyone was discussing what the North could give the kingdom." Her voice softened. "You were the only person asking what the kingdom owed the North." My heart stopped for a moment. "Isabella." She looked away. "We attended many meetings together." That answer was too simple, too careful. I looked at her. "You remembered this for 10 years. Silence. Then she said, "Yes." The room became quiet, and suddenly, I realized something. I thought Isabella Ravencrest had only recently started seeing me. But maybe, I was the one who had never noticed her. That night, before sleeping, I looked at the woman beside me, the woman everyone called dangerous, the woman the royal family feared, the woman who had spent years silently standing somewhere in the crowd, watching me, and for the first time, I wondered, how long had Isabella Ravencrest been choosing me before I finally chose her? I spent my entire life believing that love was something I had to earn. A successful negotiation, a solved crisis, a sacrifice nobody asked for. Every time I protected Serafina, every time I fixed another problem for the royal family, I thought I was proving something, that I was worthy, that one day she would finally look at me and realize I was the person who had always been standing beside her. But Isabella taught me something different. The person who truly cared about you did not need you to prove your value first. They saw it before you ever asked them to. After I found the old report in Isabella's study, I could not stop thinking about it. 10 years. She had kept a document I wrote 10 years ago. Not a royal decree, not a famous achievement, just a proposal about sending supplies to northern villages. Something I had almost forgotten, but she remembered. The next morning, I found her on the castle balcony. She was watching the snow-covered mountains. I walked beside her. "Isabella." She turned. "Yes, I want to ask you something." Her expression became serious. "About the report." I nodded. "How long have you known me?" For a moment, she said nothing. Then she looked back at the mountains. "Longer than you think." That answer surprised me. "Why never tell me?" Her fingers tightened slightly around the railing. "Because you loved someone else." The words were quiet, but they hit harder than I expected. I looked at her. "You knew." Everyone knew. I almost laughed. Apparently everyone except me. A faint smile appeared on her face. Almost invisible, but real. "You were not exactly easy to approach." That sounds like a complaint. It is. I looked at her. She continued, "You were always surrounded by people. Ministers, generals, royal officials. Everyone wanted something from you." She paused. "But you always noticed the people who needed help." I became silent, because that was exactly what she had seen. Something nobody else had. Not my achievements. Not my family name. Not my political influence. Me. "I saw you for the first time at a noble meeting." Isabella's voice became softer. The discussion was about northern taxes. "I remember." "Of course you do." She looked at me. "Everyone was arguing about how much profit they could gain. Then you asked one question. I waited. You asked." She repeated my words. "If we make this decision, how many ordinary people will suffer?" For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. It was such a small moment. A moment I had completely forgotten. But she had carried it for years. "Isabella." She looked away. "I did not fall in love with you because you were powerful." Her voice was calm. "I admired you because you never acted like power was the most important thing." I looked at her. "Then why did you agree to marry me?" That question had been inside me for weeks. Because I needed to know, was she truly choosing me? Or was I simply the best political option? Isabella turned toward me. Her golden brown eyes met mine. "Because you asked me." I frowned. "That's simple." "Yes." She answered without hesitation. "You were the first person who came to me and asked for my hand. Not my army. Not my family's influence. Not my title. Me." The word was quiet, but it carried more weight than any political agreement. I realized something. The difference between Isabella and everyone else was not that she needed me less. It was that she wanted me without needing anything from me. That evening, we received news from the capital. A diplomatic crisis. The Carson Empire had sent an official delegation. Their demand was simple and unreasonable. They wanted compensation for a border incident, a payment large enough to damage Asterland's economy, and they wanted access to northern trade routes. The moment I read the report, I understood. This was not about compensation. It was pressure. Someone was testing our weakness. Isabella stood beside me. "What do you think?" I looked at the documents. "They want us to react emotionally." Her eyes narrowed. "Lucian." I nodded. The Silver Lion Knight commander had always chosen his sword before his mind. "And the royal court, they will panic." She looked at me. "But we will not." For some reason, that sentence made me smile. Not because of the crisis, because I realized something. I no longer faced problems alone. That night, we stayed in the strategy room until midnight. Maps covered the table. Reports surrounded us. But unlike my past life, I was not carrying everything myself. Isabella challenged my ideas. I challenged hers. Sometimes we disagreed. Sometimes we argued. But neither of us tried to win. We tried to find the answer. At one point, she looked at me. "You know what is strange?" "What?" "I thought marriage would feel like losing freedom." I raised an eyebrow. "And now?" She looked at the documents. "Now it feels like having someone who understands the burden." Those words stayed with me. Later, when we returned to our room, Isabella stopped near the door. "Kane." "Yes." She hesitated. "A rare sight." "What?" She looked away. "Thank you." I smiled slightly. "For what?" "For choosing me." The room became quiet, because she did not know. I had been waiting my entire life to hear someone say that. I stepped closer. "Isabella." "Yes." "I did not choose you because Serafina chose someone else." Her expression changed. "I did not marry you because I lost something." I looked into her eyes. "I married you because I found something." For the first time, Isabella looked completely speechless. I slowly raised my hand, but before I touched her, I stopped. "May I?" Her eyes widened slightly. She understood. This was not about taking. It was about asking. After a long second, she nodded. "Yes." I kissed her. Not because I wanted to forget my past. Not because I wanted to prove something. But because for the first time in my life, I was standing beside someone who had already chosen me. And I finally chose her back. The next morning, another message arrived. The Carson Empire had changed their demands. They no longer wanted negotiations. They wanted war. And at the bottom of the letter was a symbol I recognized. A black raven. The mark of someone inside Asterland. someone who had been waiting for this moment, someone who knew exactly where to strike. And for the first time since my rebirth, I realized something. Changing my fate was not enough. I also had to stop the person who destroyed it the first time. I always thought the most painful thing in my life was dying. I was wrong. The most painful thing was realizing that I had spent my entire life protecting people who never truly understood what it cost me. In my previous life, I stood in front of Serafina when the assassin fired. I remember the sound, the scream, the feeling of my body moving before my mind could react. I remember the arrow entering my chest, and I remember the look in her eyes afterward. Not love, not fear, suspicion. She wondered if I had done it to gain sympathy. Back then, I still convinced myself that it did not matter. As long as she was safe, as long as the kingdom survived, as long as I fulfilled my duty. But this life was different, because this time, the person standing behind me was someone who would never let me sacrifice myself alone. The attack happened 3 days after the Carson Empire withdrew their demands. The kingdom celebrated the victory. The nobles praised our alliance. The royal court called it a diplomatic miracle. But Isabella and I knew better. Peace was never created by words. It was created when your enemies believed the cost of attacking you was too high. And someone had just learned that Asterland was stronger than expected. Someone who did not like that. We were returning from a northern inspection when I noticed something strange. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no movement, no sound except the wheels of our carriage. My hand immediately moved toward my sword. Isabella noticed. What is wrong? I looked outside. Something is wrong. The moment I finished speaking, a sharp sound cut through the air. A crossbow, not aimed at me, her. I did not think. I moved. I grabbed Isabella and pushed her down. The arrow passed through the space where her head had been. A second later, pain exploded through my shoulder. The world became silent. Cain. I heard Isabella's voice. Not the calm voice of the northern commander. Not the voice she used when giving orders. A voice filled with fear. I fell to one knee. My hand covered the wound. But I was not looking at the blood. I was looking at her. She was alive. That was all that mattered. Are you hurt? Her expression changed. For a moment, she looked almost angry. You are asking me that. I tried to stand, but my body refused. The next thing I knew, Isabella was holding me. Her hands were shaking, actually shaking. I had seen her face soldiers charging into battle. I had seen her stand before thousands of troops without hesitation. But now, one arrow in my shoulder had broken her composure. Stay awake. Her voice was low, almost a command, almost a plea. Isabella. No. She tightened her grip. Do not tell me you are fine. I froze, because those were my words. The same words I had said countless times. Every time someone asked if I was tired, every time someone asked if I was hurt, I was fine, always fine. But Isabella looked at me like she could see through every lie. The assassins were quickly eliminated. Isabella personally chased their leader through the forest. When she returned, there was blood on her sword. Not hers. She looked terrifying. But when she saw me, all that coldness disappeared. The woman everyone feared rushed toward me. Not the northern heir. Not the future duchess. Just Isabella. The healer said the arrow missed my heart. A few inches more, and I would have died. Everyone in the room became silent. Everyone except Isabella. She stayed beside my bed. For 19 hours. She refused every request to rest. My lady, you have military meetings tomorrow. Cancel them. The Northern Council requires your presence. They can wait. The advisor hesitated. Your territory can survive 1 day without me. She looked at me, but he cannot. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was Isabella. She was sitting beside me, still holding my hand. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she realized I was awake. Her eyes changed. Relief, fear, and something deeper. You scared me. Those 4 words almost hurt more than the arrow. Because Isabella Ravencrest did not admit fear. Not to anyone. I slowly squeezed her hand. I am sorry. She looked down. I always thought strength meant needing nobody. Her voice became quieter. My father taught me that weakness was something enemies could use against me. She looked at me. But then you appeared. I listened. You never asked me to become weaker. You never tried to control me. You just stood beside me. A tear almost appeared in her eyes. Almost. But even now, she fought against showing it. I was afraid. She whispered. Not because I was injured. Because I realized I could lose you. I looked at her. Isabella. She met my eyes. I need you to understand something. I paused. The first reason I married you was because you were the person I trusted most. She listened quietly. But the reason I am still here, I tightened my hand around hers, is because I love you. For the first time, Isabella stopped pretending. She leaned forward. Her forehead touched mine. I love you too. Simple, quiet. But those words changed everything. That night, while Isabella slept beside me, I studied the assassin's weapon, the metal markings, the manufacturing symbol. I knew it. Eastern military production. Not a random attack. Not a personal revenge. Political move. Someone powerful had ordered this. And when the investigation report arrived the next morning, I saw the name attached to the weapon shipment. Duke Adrian Voss. The man who destroyed my kingdom once. The man who was trying to do it again. But this time, I was not alone. This time, I had Isabella beside me. And together, we would destroy the future he had planned. I used to believe the hardest battle in life was surviving. I was wrong. The hardest battle was letting go of the person you once thought you were meant to become. In my first life, I spent everything trying to stand beside a throne. I thought if I became useful enough, if I protected the kingdom enough, if I sacrificed enough, one day Princess Serafina would finally choose me. But after my rebirth, I learned something much more painful. Being needed was not the same as being loved, and being chosen after someone loses you was never the same as being chosen from the beginning. 3 days after the assassination attempt, I walked into the royal council chamber. The room fell silent. Everyone thought I was still recovering. Everyone thought the arrow had nearly taken my life. They were right, but what they did not know was that the attack had given us exactly what we needed. A mistake. A desperate mistake from a man who believed he had already won. Duke Adrian Voss stood near the center of the chamber. Calm, confident, exactly like the man I remembered from my previous life. The man who watched Asterland burn while pretending to save it. He looked at me, then at Isabella standing beside me. A small smile appeared on his face. You survived. I looked at him. Yes, I paused. And I learned something. His expression remained unchanged. What? I stepped forward. People who hide behind shadows are usually afraid of the light. The entire chamber became quiet. Then I placed the first document on the table. A communication record between Adrian and Carson Empire officials. The second, military supply reports proving manipulated grain prices. The third, the order authorizing the assassination of Isabella Ravencrest. And finally, the evidence that had destroyed my first life. The forged documents claiming House Blackrose intended to control the royal family. The room exploded. Nobles shouted. Ministers demanded answers. Adrian's expression finally changed. Only slightly, but I saw it. Fear. For the first time, Duke Adrian Voss was afraid. You planned everything. King Valen's voice trembled with anger. Adrian remained silent, because there was nothing left to explain. Every path he created, every conflict he started, every person he manipulated, all of it was exposed. Then the chamber doors opened. Lucian Vale entered. His face was pale, because he already knew. He knew the truth. Adrian had convinced him that I was preparing a coup, that House Blackrose and Ravencrest planned to replace the royal family, that protecting Serafina required action. But Lucian had only been another piece on Adrian's board. I thought. His voice was low. I thought I was protecting her. Nobody answered, because everyone knew the truth. Lucian loved Serafina, but love without wisdom could still become a weapon. The king removed his command emblem. Lucian Vale, you are relieved of your position as commander of the Silver Lion Knights. Lucian lowered his head. He did not fight. For once, he understood the consequences of his choices. Adrian Voss was arrested that day. The kingdom survived, but it would never return to what it was before. The king announced reforms. The nobles would no longer control everything behind closed doors. A new council would be created, one where military power, financial power, and civilian voices had to exist together. And standing at the center of those changes were House Blackrose and House Ravencrest, not as rulers, but as partners. I thought that was the end, but I was wrong, because there was one person I still needed to face. Serafina. I found her in the palace garden, the same garden where, years ago, she had told me, "I believe in you, Cain," the words that had shaped my entire first life. She turned when she saw me. For a moment, she looked exactly like the girl I remembered. Then she spoke. I was wrong. Simple. No excuses. No pride. Just honesty. I thought you wanted power. I thought marrying you meant losing control of my own life. She looked down. I was afraid of you. Those words hurt. But not because they surprised me. Because I finally understood. She had never hated me. She had just never trusted me. I confused your strength with ambition. Your loyalty with control. Her voice became softer. But I was wrong. A long silence followed. Then she said the words my old self had waited years to hear. I can end my engagement with Lucian. I can choose you now. For a moment, the past returned. The old Cain would have stepped forward. He would have forgiven everything. He would have believed this was the reward waiting after 10 years of suffering. But that man was gone. I looked at Serafina. I loved you. Her eyes trembled. But I cannot return. The question was quiet. Because she already knew the answer. Because Isabella chose me when she had nothing to gain. I paused. She saw me before I needed to prove myself. She trusted me before I gave her a reason to. Serafina lowered her head. And I didn't. I said nothing. Because she was right. When I left the garden, Isabella was waiting outside. She did not ask what happened. She did not demand explanations. She simply reached out her hand. And I took it. That small action meant more than any promise. Because Isabella trusted me. Not because she controlled my choices, but because she believed in them. Months later, the new Northern Council Hall was completed. Snow covered the mountains. The kingdom was changing. Not perfect, not peaceful forever, but stronger. Isabella stood beside me on the balcony. You were once very close to becoming the king's family. I smiled. And now, she looked at me. Do you regret it? I looked at her. The woman who had chosen me when I had nothing to offer. The woman who protected me when I finally admitted I needed protection. The woman who stood beside me. Not behind me. Not beneath me. Beside me. No. She tilted her head. I held her hand. Because in my first life, I spent years waiting for someone to choose me. I looked at the kingdom below. In my second life, I chose the person who had already chosen me. For the first time, Isabella smiled without hiding it. The snow continued falling, and I finally understood the meaning of my second chance. I was not reborn to reclaim what I lost. I was reborn to find what I should have chosen from the beginning.